The Hill has this startling headline, startling for them anyway. High school boys are trending conservative. Oh no, dear God. A popular narrative suggests young people, are reading now from the article, are liberal and getting more liberal. Thus, social media buzzed when a chat surfaced in spring that seemed to suggest 12th grade boys have become overwhelmingly conservative. As with many Reddit posts and viral tweets, the tweet was more complicated. The truth was more complicated, but the numbers do say this. 12th grade boys are nearly twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, according to a respected federal survey of American youth. In annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly 1/4 of high school seniors self-identified as conservative or very conservative on the Monitoring the Future survey, a scholarly endeavor that dates to the 1970s. Only 13% of boys identified as liberal or very liberal in those years. The figures represent a striking shift in the political views of boys. As recently as the late 2000s, liberal boys occasionally outnumbered conservatives. Back in the Carter era, both boys and girls lean liberal. Nowadays, it's girls who are drifting to the left. The share of 12th grade girls who identified as liberal rose from 19% in 2012 to 30% in 2022. Only 12% of girls identified as conservative in the last year's survey administered by the University of Michigan. Young women, too, are trending liberal. Women ages 18 to 29 are more likely to identify as liberal now than at any time in the past 2 decades, according to Gallup surveys. Young women are also almost twice as likely as young men to claim the liberal tag, a widening gender gap in political beliefs. So that's kind of the headline. That you've got overall young men and boys are trending conservative, and when you narrow it down to 12th grade boys, they're twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, which is a striking difference from the past, as they point out. Now, I think there are a few things happening here. A few reasons why teenage boys and young men are increasingly becoming conservative. And the first is that conservatism is rebellious, okay? It's edgy, it's offensive in our culture. By our culture standards, it's the rebellious, edgy, offensive thing. And if you have that kind of renegade instinct, that desire to rebel, as many young people do, especially boys, then this is where you go. As I pointed out before, if you're a kid in high school and you want to be edgy and cool, you can't do that by adopting the same position as your middle-aged math teacher. Like, the moment that your math teacher starts waving a pride flag and talking about how the Bible is evil is the moment that it becomes extremely uncool to love the pride flag and hate the Bible. This drives towards, there's a drive among the youth, obviously, towards rebellion. That's not news to anybody. And historically, it's been harnessed by the left against the right. And that's the reason why, if you go back, as they point out, you go back to the 60s and 70s, you're going to find that the situation is completely reversed, where young boys are much more likely to identify as liberal versus conservative. That's because that was the rebellious thing at the time. For a long time, what we consider now to be conservative ideals were the popular mainstream ideals. The conservative position, as we consider it now, was the dominant cultural position, which is not the case anymore. Which means the left is in control. It means they're the dominant cultural force, which is bad. But the good thing is that they lose their rebel status. That's the one good thing. Even if they pretend to still have it, which they do, so you end up with aging punk rockers still going out and pretending to rage against the machine by saying everything that your HR rep at work would say. But it's all a charade, and kids, for the most part, see right through it. So this is a great advantage for us, that we should be harnessing much more than we are. And you have to harness it in a smart way, obviously. I mean, you can't actually go up to kids and say, hey, kids, want to be edgy and cool? Be conservative. You can't say it as in a way as on the nose as that, because that makes it sound lame. But that is basically the message and the truth. Conservatism is edgy. It's much cooler. And partly because it's the only place where you can have a sense of humor. And that's the other thing about teenage boys. And I know this from having been one not that long ago. Well, pretty long ago. I mean, really long ago, but still. I was one at one time. And I can still remember that as a teenage boy, you have a very outrageous, offensive, kind of morbid, aggressive sense of humor. Teenage boys amused themselves by insulting each other, like among friends, just insulting each other in extremely vulgar and personal ways. And And to some extent, you never grow out of that. Yeah, even as you become a man, as men, we never quite grow out of that. We still think it's funny to like make fun of each other and stuff. But there's no room for that on the left at all. I mean, you cannot have a man's sense of humor on the left. You just can't. Profiling, surveillance, and data harvesting are just a few things I don't like about tech giants. But what can you actually do about it when you rely on so many of their products? Well, the good news is it doesn't take much for you to take a stand. For less than $7 per month, you can join me and fight back against big tech by using ExpressVPN. Big tech companies make their money by tracking your searches, video history, everything you click on, and then selling your personal data. ExpressVPN helps you anonymize much of your online presence by hiding your IP address, a unique identifier that every device has that allows big tech to match your activity back to you. That's why I use ExpressVPN on all of my devices to make it much more difficult for them to exploit my data for their own profits. Best part is how easy it is to use the ExpressVPN app. I just tap one button on my phone or computer, turn it on, and that's it. Your data is your business. Visit expressvpn.com/Walsh right now to get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/Walsh to get protected now. expressvpn.com/Walsh. Innovation Refunds has been helping small businesses that qualify to get a business payroll tax refund through the Employee Retention Credit Act, or also known as the ERC. The ERC is a tax refund for businesses that kept employees on payroll for parts of 2020 and 2021. If you own a business with more than 5 employees, you could have money waiting to be claimed right now. You just have to know how to claim it. That's where Innovation Refunds comes in. Innovation Refunds is dedicated to helping business owners navigate the process, and their independent tax attorneys can help your business stay compliant with IRS guidelines and regulations. Innovation Refunds does not provide tax or legal advice. They work with an independent network of tax professionals, and they will share information with them to evaluate and process your claims. Go to getrefunds.com to determine eligibility. If you qualify, you could be on your way to receiving money for your business. There's no upfront charge since they don't get paid unless you get paid. So go to getrefunds.com or dial 1-843-REFUNDS. That's getrefunds.com or 1-843-REFUNDS. Terms and conditions apply. In fact, as it turns out, you can't have a man's sense of anything on the left. You cannot be a man on the left. Which brings us to the second factor, which could explain why boys are increasingly becoming conservative, which is that the left, if you are a high school boy, the left is doing nothing but heaping scorn and contempt on you. Telling you to be ashamed of yourself, of your masculinity, calling you toxic, lecturing you, scolding you, yelling at you. On and on and on, a constant, never-ending harangue. Another difference between now and back then in the 60s and 70s. It used to be that when you thought of the humorless scolds, what immediately comes to mind is like the church lady, right? The conservative, you're thinking of conservatives, so it's supposed to be these humorless scolds, don't have a sense of humor, they're offended by everything, writing angry letters because they're offended by this and that. That's the left. That's what the left does. That's their gig. And they're very excited to explain to you why everything you think and say is offensive, especially if you're a male. So what else if you're a teenage boy, what else are you going to do? So you've got these people over here who hate you and don't even disguise their contempt. And meanwhile, they're on the other end of it, they're doing nothing but heaping praise and adulation and celebration for like every other group. They're constantly saying, oh, you're so special, you're great, you're wonderful, you should be accepted exactly as you are. Everything about you is perfect. You're the most wonderful thing on the planet. That's their message to everyone. But then they turn around to you and say, oh, you scumbags. Why don't you be more like them? Except you can't be more like them because that'd be appropriation. And I think teenage boys hear that and they respond exactly as you would expect them to. Which means that, again, on the right, the goal here is to harness this to our advantage and ultimately the advantage of the culture and truth. Because the really good thing is that in this case, it's not just that going over to the right is now rebellious and edgy and all the rest of it. But that's also where the truth is on all these issues. When we see these, what I find to be extremely encouraging videos of, again, high school boys, tearing down the pride flags and mocking attempts by schools to, groom them into the LGBT cult. And these videos come out, very encouraging. But it's not just because it's politically advantageous for us. It's because what they are rejecting falsehood in favor of the truth. And the question is, how are we going to harness that on the right? And there hasn't been nearly enough of that. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.